He didn't say much, wore a flannel shirt, jeans, and a ball cap with no insignia. His shooting stance was old school, his grouping flawless. The younger guys thought he was just some retired trucker burning ammo, until a SEAL recruit caught a glimpse of the tattoo on his forearm while reloading and froze, not because it was flashy, but because it was a symbol you don't just ink, you earn it. And when a recruit asked where he served, the entire range went quiet because the answer didn't come. With words, just a number, a year, and suddenly no one was laughing anymore. The emergency alarm screamed through Fort Bradley at 0630 hours. Just as Staff Sergeant Marcus Rivera was setting up his morning workout routine, the piercing sound bounced off the concrete walls of the gymnasium, where 12 elite soldiers from the 82nd Airborne had gathered for their daily physical training session. Rivera, a muscular 28-year-old with sharp brown eyes and a crew cut that could cut glass, dropped his weights. Immediately, his tactical vest bearing multiple commendation ribbons caught the fluorescent light as he spun toward the source of the alarm. His team of 11 crack soldiers, ranging from 22 to 31 years old, each representing years of specialized training and combat experience, froze in their tracks, their conversations about upcoming deployments and recent operations cut short by the urgent wailing that meant only one thing: real danger at Fort Bradley. In the corner of the gym, pushing a mop bucket with wheels that squeaked like dying mice, was William Thompson, a 63-year-old janitor with gray hair peeking from under his faded baseball cap, weathered hands that moved with surprising steadiness, and coveralls that hung loose on his lean 5 feet 10 inches frame. He had been working the morning shift for 8 years, now arriving before dawn, cleaning equipment, restocking towels, and disappearing before the real soldiers showed up for training to Rivera and his elite. Team Bill was just part of the furniture, another piece of equipment that happened to be human, invisible maintenance staff who collected a modest paycheck without complaint. Welcome to those who left a trace, where we uncover the extraordinary stories hiding behind ordinary faces. Before we dive into this incredible tale of hidden valor and unexpected heroism, tell us in the comments where in the world you're watching from today. And if you believe stories like this deserve to be heard, hit that subscribe button to join our community of truth seekers. The alarm continued its relentless shriek as Rivera's radio crackled to life with urgent chatter from base command. All units report to stations immediately. We have a code red situation. Building 7 is compromised. Repeat, Building 7 is compromised. Unknown armed intruders have breached the perimeter. Multiple casualties reported. This is not a drill. Rivera's face went stone cold as he processed the information. Building 7 housed the base's communication center and classified intelligence. Files of enemy operatives had gotten inside. They could access secrets that would compromise ongoing operations worldwide. Corporal James Mitchell, a lanky 24-year-old from Texas with piercing blue eyes, grabbed his gear and looked around frantically. We're not armed, Sergeant. Our weapons are locked in the armory across base. By the time we get there and gear up, whoever's in Building 7 could download everything, or worse, Private First Class Davidson, the youngest team member at 22 with coal black hair, an eager face that still showed traces of his recent deployment anxiety, voiced what everyone was thinking: if they've got hostages and their people are going to die while we're running around trying to find equipment. Specialist Tony Rodriguez, a stocky 26-year-old whose arms were covered in tactical tattoos, keyed his radio trying to reach other units on base, but got nothing except static interference. They're jamming communications. He reported, his voice tight with frustration. We're flying blind here, Sergeant. No backup. No intel, no weapons. This is a nightmare scenario. Rodriguez had seen similar situations in Afghanistan where communication blackouts preceded coordinated attacks that left entire outposts vulnerable to systematic destruction. What none of them noticed in their urgency was that Bill Thompson had stopped mopping. He stood perfectly still near the far wall, his weathered face showing none of the panic that gripped the elite soldiers. Instead, his gray eyes scanned the room with a calculating intensity that seemed oddly out of place for a maintenance worker. His posture had shifted almost imperceptibly from the slouched stance of an elderly janitor to something straighter, more alert, as if decades of muscle memory were quietly awakening beneath his faded coveralls. Rivera was already moving toward the exit when the lights went out, plunging the gymnasium into complete darkness, followed immediately by the distinctive sound of the ventilation system shutting down. They've cut the power. Mitchell's voice echoed in the blackness, his usual confident tone, now edged with uncertainty. The emergency lighting should have kicked in by now, but the backup systems seemed to have been disabled, as well, leaving them in a darkness so complete that soldiers who had operated in the world's most dangerous environments found themselves disoriented and vulnerable. In the pitch black, Bill's voice cut through confusion, calm, steady, and carrying an authority that made every soldier in the room freeze. Listen carefully. You have approximately 4 minutes before they breach this building. His words were spoken with the measured precision of someone who had been in similar situations before. They disabled the power grid first, then communications, then backup systems. This is a coordinated professional operation, not random terrorism. The shocked silence that followed was broken by Rivera's incredulous voice. "What did you just say, old man?" But there was something different in the sergeant's tone, now a recognition that the quiet janitor who had been invisible for 8 years had just demonstrated knowledge that no maintenance worker should possess. Bill's response came through the darkness with the same unnerving calm. "Staff Sergeant Rivera, you and your team need to move to defensive positions immediately. The main entrance will be their primary breach point." "How the hell do you know that?" Mitchell demanded, but even as he spoke, he was unconsciously following the janitor's instructions, moving toward cover behind the weight equipment, his training taking over despite his confusion. Rodriguez fumbled for his phone's flashlight, but Bill's voice stopped him. "No lights. They have night vision capabilities and thermal imaging. Any light source will make you a target." The certainty in his voice was absolute, the kind that comes from experience, not speculation. Chen's young voice cracked slightly as he whispered, "Who are you?" But Bill was already moving through the darkness with a silence that seemed impossible for a 63-year-old maintenance worker. His footsteps made no sound as he navigated between equipment that he had cleaned for 8 years, but now seemed to know with tactical precision. "Rodriguez, you're closest to the emergency supply cabinet behind the parallel bars. There are medical supplies and emergency radios in there." His directions were specific, immediate, and accurate. As Rodriguez felt his way to the location Bill had indicated, his hands found exactly what had been described: medical kits, emergency communication equipment, and something else, a lock compartment that his fingers detected by touch alone. "There's something else here," he whispered. "Feels like a secured box." Bill's response came immediately. "Combination is 1-7-5-2-0-0. That's your emergency armament cache." The numbers meant something to Rivera, who had enough clearance to know that certain facilities maintained hidden weapon caches for scenarios exactly like this one. The combination corresponded to dates and protocols that were above his clearance level, but the fact that a janitor knew them sent chills down his spine. As Rodriguez worked the combination, the sound of approaching vehicles became audible through the building's walls. Multiple engines, heavy equipment, the kind of sound that meant serious trouble was about to get worse. What would you do in this soldier's boots? Comment below if you think these elite troops are about to discover something that will change everything they thought they knew about their quiet janitor. The cache opened with a metallic click, revealing contents that made Rodriguez gasp. Despite their situation, military-grade handguns, tactical knives, night vision equipment, and communication devices that were definitely not standard issue for gymnasium emergency supplies. "Jesus Christ," he breathed. "This stuff is level 4 classified." But Bill was already issuing instructions with precision of someone who had planned for this exact scenario decades ago. "Mitchell, you take the northwest corner behind the rowing machines. You have clear sight lines of both entrances. Chun, get behind the weight rack on the east wall. Rodriguez, distribute weapons now. We have maybe 90 seconds before they breach." His commands were sharp, military efficient, and completely at odds with the shuffling janitor who had been invisible to them for years. Rivera found himself automatically following orders from a man he had dismissed as irrelevant just minutes before. As weapons were distributed in the darkness, Bill's voice continued with tactical instructions that demonstrated knowledge no civilian should possess. "They'll use flashbangs first, then smoke grenades to disorient before entry. Your night vision will give you approximately 15-second advantage before they adapt to the lighting changes. Make every shot count, because backup won't reach us for 20 minutes minimum." The sound of boots on concrete echoed from the corridor outside, followed by the distinctive metallic clicks of military equipment being readied. Rodriguez had his night vision goggles on now and could see Bill moving through the gymnasium with fluid precision that belonged to someone decades Younger, his movements were economical practice, displaying muscle memory that spoke of extensive training. Mitchell's voice came through their improvised communication system. Whoever this guy is, he's not just a janitor. Chen's position behind the weight rack gave him a clear view of the main entrance, where shadows were moving in formation outside the reinforced doors. "I count 6 figures approaching from the north entrance," he reported. "They're setting charges." Bill's response was immediate. "Everyone down, breach in 10 seconds. His countdown was exact, and when the explosion came exactly when he predicted, it confirmed that the 63-year-old maintenance worker possessed knowledge and experience that belonged to an entirely different kind of person. The flashbang grenades came next, just as Bill had warned, but his team was ready their night vision equipment, allowing them to maintain visual contact. While the attackers were temporarily blinded by their own devices, Rodriguez took the first shot, dropping one intruder. Immediately, Mitchell followed with 2 precise shots from his position. Chen's angle allowed him to catch another operative trying to flank through the emergency exit. But it was Bill's performance that left the soldiers speechless. The man who had been pushing a mop just 15 minutes earlier moved to the combat zone with the fluid grace of someone who had done this countless times before. His weapon handling was textbook perfect, his positioning flawless, his tactical awareness superhuman. He seemed to anticipate the attackers' movements before they made them, directing his team's fire with precision that turned a desperate defensive situation into a coordinated counterattack. Rodriguez moved to Sector 7. They're trying to establish crossfire. Bill's instructions came continuously, each one proving accurate as the battle unfolded. "Mitchell, hold your position. They're going to attempt breach from your 9 o'clock in 15 seconds. Chan, when I give the signal, provide covering fire for Rodriguez's movement." His tactical knowledge was encyclopedic, his timing perfect. The attackers had clearly expected to face either unarmed personnel or lightly trained soldiers. What they encountered instead was a defensive position coordinated by someone who understood military tactics at a level that suggested extensive special operations experience. Their planned 15-minute operation stretched to 30 minutes, then 45, as Bill's team systematically dismantled their tactical advantages, using counter-strategies that belonged in advanced military manuals. As the last intruder was neutralized, the gymnasium fell silent, except for the sound of heavy breathing and the distant wail of approaching sirens. Backup had finally arrived, but the battle was over. Rivera's team had successfully defended a critical military installation under the leadership of a man they had considered invisible just 1 hour earlier. As emergency lighting finally restored partial visibility to the gymnasium, the soldiers could see Bill Thompson standing calmly near his abandoned mop bucket. "Do you think Staff Sergeant Rivera is about to get the shock of his military career? Smash that like button if you're ready to see this quiet hero's true identity revealed." The aftermath was controlled chaos as military police secured the area, medics checked for injuries, and intelligence officers began processing the scene. Rivera approached Bill, who was methodically cleaning his weapon with the same attention to detail he brought to mopping floors. "Who the hell are you?" the sergeant demanded, but his tone had changed from dismissive to respectful. Bill looked up with those same gray eyes that had seemed unremarkable for 8 years. "Just someone who believes in doing his job properly." Colonel Patricia Hayes arrived on scene within minutes, her crisp uniform bearing the insignia of base commander, and her sharp blue eyes immediately assessed the situation with professional efficiency. At 47 years old, with graying brown hair pulled back in a regulation bun, she commanded Fort Bradley for 3 years and thought she knew every significant person on her base. The sight of Bill Thompson calmly standing among elite soldiers with a tactical weapon in his hands stopped her cold. "Sergeant Rivera, report," she demanded, but her eyes never left Bill, who had returned to an almost formal position of attention that seemed natural despite his janitor's coveralls. Rivera struggled to find words. "Ma'am, the unidentified subject appears to have extensive military training. He coordinated our defensive response with tactical knowledge that suggests special operations background." His official language couldn't hide his confusion. Colonel Hayes approached Bill directly, her expression unreadable. "Maintenance worker William Thompson, correct?" she asked, consulting a tablet that displayed his personnel file. 8 years employment record, janitorial services, no military background, listed no security clearances. Bill nodded once. "That's correct, ma'am." But something in his posture suggested there was much more to the story than his official employment record indicated. Chun, who had been watching the exchange with growing curiosity, spoke up, "Ma'am, permission to speak freely." Hayes nodded, and the young soldier continued, "His tactical knowledge was beyond anything I learned in advanced infantry training. He knew weapon cache locations, combination codes, enemy strategy patterns." Chen's voice carried the amazement of someone who had witnessed something that didn't fit any logical explanation. The intelligence officer who had been processing the scene approached with a briefcase full of equipment recovered from the attackers. "Colonel, these operatives were carrying technology that suggests state-level backing. This wasn't a random attack. This was a coordinated attempt to access our classified communication systems." He glanced at Bill with professional curiosity. Whoever coordinated the defensive response prevented a major intelligence breach. Mitchell stepped forward. "Ma'am, he knew exactly what they were going to do before they did it. He predicted their breach points, their timing, their tactics." The young corporal's voice carried respect that hadn't been there an hour earlier. "And he kept us alive when we should have been sitting ducks." Rodriguez nodded agreement. His weapons handling was Special Forces level or higher. Colonel Hayes studied Bill with new intensity. "Maintenance worker Thompson, you seem to have knowledge that extends beyond your job description." Her tone was careful official, but underneath was genuine curiosity. Bill's response was measured. "Sometimes experience applies itself in unexpected situations, ma'am." But his gray eyes held depths that suggested stories no personnel file would ever contain. The base security chief arrived, carrying a sealed folder that he handed directly to Colonel Hayes. As she opened, her expression changed dramatically. The confidential document seemed to contain information that recontextualized everything about the quiet janitor who had just saved her base. "Thompson William J., born 1961. She read slowly. "Navy SEAL Team 6, 1979. To 2004, 25 years active duty service." The words hung in the air like a revelation. Rivera's mouth fell open. "SEAL Team 6. He repeated the most elite special operations unit in the military, the soldiers who handle missions so classified that their existence was barely acknowledged, and looked like he had seen a ghost. Rodriguez whispered, "Jesus Christ, no wonder." Mitchell just stared at Bill with newfound understanding of everything that had just happened. Colonel Hayes continued reading. "Operation Urgent Fury Grenada, 1983 operation. Just cause Panama, 1989 Gulf War, 1991 Afghanistan, 2001. The 2003 final deployment operation, Iraqi Freedom, 2003 to 2004. Each mission name represented years of the most dangerous military operations in recent history. 47 confirmed kills in combat situations, 17 successful hostage extractions, classified operations spanning 25 years. The revelation transformed everything the soldiers thought they knew about the quiet man who had cleaned their gymnasium for 8 years. Bill's tactical knowledge hadn't been lucky guesses. It had been the application of decades of experience in situations where failure meant death. As calm under pressure hadn't been unusual. It had been the natural response of someone who had survived missions that most soldiers never even heard about. Retired with full honors, 2004, Hayes finished Purple Heart, Bronze Star, Silver Star, Navy Cross, and classified commendation for operations that remain above my clearance level. She looked at Bill with a mixture of respect and curiosity. The question is why someone with his background is working as a janitor at Fort Bradley. Bill's answer was simple. "Because somebody has to clean the floors, ma'am." But Chin pressed further. "Sir, why didn't you tell us who you were?" Bill's response carried the wisdom of someone who had seen enough combat to understand what really mattered. "Because what I was doesn't matter, son. What matters is what needed to be done today." His humility was genuine, a mark of someone who had nothing left to prove to anyone, including himself. Rodriguez looked around at the tactical positions they'd held during the firefight, understanding now why Bill's instructions had been so precise. "You've done this before," he said. "Defended positions under impossible odds." Bill nodded once. "Different places, different times, but the principles remain the same. Protect your team. Complete the mission. Bring everyone home." Get ready, because the most incredible part of this story is still coming. Subscribe if you want to see how this humble hero's past connects to the attack that just happened. Colonel Hayes closed the classified file and looked directly at Bill. "Mr. Thompson, given your background and what just occurred, I think it's time we had a more detailed conversation about your presence at Fort Bradley." There was no accusation in her voice, just professional curiosity about how a decorated Navy SEAL had ended up pushing a mop at a routine military installation. Before Bill could respond, a black SUV pulled up outside the gymnasium, and two individuals in dark suits emerged, their bearing and coordination immediately identifying them as federal agents. Rivera recognized the type from Joint Operations Intelligence Community. He muttered to Mitchell, who nodded grimly, understanding that Bill's story was about to become much more complicated. The lead agent entered the gymnasium and approached Colonel Hayes directly. "Agent Sarah Martinez, FBI Special Operations Division. We need to debrief the individual who coordinated the defensive response." Her eyes found Bill immediately despite his unremarkable appearance, suggesting she knew exactly who she was looking for. "Mr. Thompson, we've been looking for you for quite some time." Bill's reaction was measured, but Rivera noticed a subtle change, his posture, the relaxed stance of a maintenance worker shifting to something more alert. "Agent Martinez, I assume this is about the Moscow incident." His words carried implications that none of the soldiers understood, but Agent Martinez nodded grimly. "Among other things, yes, the attack today wasn't random." Chin looked between Bill and the FBI agent with growing confusion. "What Moscow incident?" But Agent Martinez's attention remained focused on Bill. "The operatives we captured today were carrying intelligence that suggests they specifically targeted this facility because they knew you were here." Her revelation sent chills through the assembled soldiers. Rodriguez stepped forward. They came here for him. It wasn't a question, but Agent Martinez confirmed it anyway. William Thompson's identity was supposedly classified beyond any normal intelligence gathering capabilities. The fact that foreign operatives knew his location suggests a security breach at the highest levels. She looked around at Rivera's team. "You gentlemen just survived an assassination attempt disguised as an intelligence operation." The implications hit the soldiers like a physical blow. They had been in danger not because of their own service, but because they happened to be in the same location as a man whose past made him a target for enemies. They couldn't even identify. Mitchell voiced what everyone was thinking. "How many people want you dead?" Bill's answer was matter of fact, enough to make retirement interesting. Agent Martinez opened a briefcase containing photographs and documents. In 2018, Mr. Thompson was part of a classified operation in Moscow that prevented a terrorist attack on the U.S. Embassy. The operation was successful, but also eliminated several high-value targets whose associates have been seeking revenge ever since. She showed photographs of the dead attackers. These men were identified as members of that same organization. Colonel Hayes studied the photographs, recognizing equipment and tactics that suggested extensive training and funding. This wasn't a random probe of our defenses. This was a precision strike designed to eliminate one specific individual. She looked at Bill with new understanding. They were willing to risk a major international incident to get to you. Bill's response carried the weariness of someone who had been dealing with such threats for years. "Ma'am, with respect, they've been trying to get to me for 6 years. That's why I chose to work here, where I could keep an eye on things while maintaining a low profile." His words revealed that his presence at Fort Bradley hadn't been coincidental, but part of a carefully planned security strategy. Rodriguez realized the implications. "You've been protecting this base," he said. "All this time we thought you were just cleaning up after us, but you were actually providing security." Bill shrugged. "Someone has to watch the watchers, and janitors see everything without being noticed. It's perfect cover for someone who needs to stay invisible." Agent Martinez nodded. Mr. Thompson's presence here was coordinated with base security at the highest levels, though his cover was so deep that even Colonel Hayes wasn't briefed on his true function. She looked apologetically at the base commander. "Need-to-know basis, unfortunately. But today's attack confirms that his cover has been compromised." Chin looked around at his teammates, understanding finally dawning. That's why he knew about the weapons cache, the emergency protocols, the tactical responses. He turned to Bill. "You helped design the security systems, didn't you?" Bill's slight smile confirmed what the young soldier had guessed. "Among other things, yes." "Wait before you go. Where in the world are you watching this from? Drop your city or country in the comments. We want to see how far this story has traveled. And hey, if this revelation about Bill's true identity shocked you, hit that like. So we know you're loving it." The debriefing continued for another hour as Agent Martinez and Colonel Hayes worked to understand the full scope of the security breach. Rivera and his team provided detailed accounts of the attack, emphasizing repeatedly how Bill's leadership had prevented what could have been a catastrophic intelligence loss. Chin noted that without Bill's tactical guidance, they would have been sitting ducks when the power went out. Mitchell described the precision of Bill's instructions and how they had seemed to anticipate every enemy move. Rodriguez brought up the weapons cache. Sir, how many other emergency resources are hidden around this base that we don't know about? Colonel Hayes looked at Agent Martinez, who nodded permission 17 concealed tactical positions throughout Fort Bradley, each one positioned to provide defensive coverage for critical infrastructure. She revealed Mr. Thompson helped design and implement the entire system. As the formal debriefing concluded, Agent Martinez addressed Bill directly. Your cover here is blown. We'll need to relocate you within 48 hours. But Bill shook his head. With respect, Agent Martinez, I've been running from these people for 6 years, and I'm tired. Besides, he looked around at Rivera's team. I've got responsibilities here now. Rivera stepped forward. Sir, if you're staying, we want to be part of your security detail. His offer was immediate and sincere. You save our lives today. The least we can do is help watch your back. Mitchell Chun and Rodriguez nodded agreement, their respect for the quiet janitor now absolute and permanent. Colonel Hayes considered the proposal. Mr. Thompson, if you're willing to accept a more official security position here, I can arrange for enhanced protection protocols and proper tactical support. Her offer recognized both his value and the ongoing threat he represented. Fort Bradley could use someone with your experience in a more appropriate capacity. Bill looked around the gymnasium where he had spent 8 years cleaning equipment and being invisible to the soldiers who trained there. The mop bucket still sat where he had abandoned it when the alarms began its squeaky wheels. An industrial design representing a life of deliberate anonymity that was now permanently over. I suppose it's time to stop hiding, he said finally. Agent Martinez began packing up her materials. We'll coordinate with base security to establish new protocols. Your identity will remain classified, but within a more limited circle. She looked at Rivera's team. You gentlemen will be briefed on security procedures and sworn to appropriate confidentiality levels. The soldiers nodded, understanding that their lives had just become significantly more complicated. As the official personnel departed, Rivera approached Bill, who had begun collecting cleaning supplies from around the gymnasium. So what do we call you now? The sergeant asked. Mr. Thompson doesn't seem right anymore, and sir feels weird after 8 years of thinking you were just a janitor. Bill considered the question seriously. Bill works fine, he replied. Rank and title matter less than the work that needs doing, and there's always work that needs doing. He gestured around the base. Security threats don't disappear just because we handled one of them today. Rivera nodded, understanding that their relationship with Bill would be different now, but his fundamental character remained unchanged. Chen approached, carrying one of the tactical weapons from the emergency cache. Sir, Bill, do you think they'll try again? Bill's answer was pragmatic. Probably, but next time we'll be ready. And next time they won't have the element of surprise. His confidence was reassuring, the voice of someone who had survived decades of similar threats. Mitchell and Rodriguez joined the group, their earlier dismissive attitudes completely transformed. Bill, Mitchell said, I owe you an apology for every smart-ass comment I made about you being just a janitor. Rodriguez nodded agreement. We all do save our lives, and we treated you like you were invisible. Bill's response showed the grace of someone who had nothing to prove. Son, you treated me exactly how a good janitor should be treated, invisible and professional. He smiled slightly. The best cover is always the one that makes people look right through you. Without thinking twice, his wisdom came from decades of understanding how to survive in hostile environments. The conversation was interrupted by Colonel Hayes, who returned with new orders. Mr. Thompson, effective immediately, you're appointed as Special Security Advisor to Fort Bradley, with full access to base security systems and authority to implement enhanced protection protocols. She handed him an official document. Your cover as maintenance staff is officially terminated. As the soldier prepared to leave, Bill stopped him. One more thing, he said. What happened here today doesn't leave this group. The fewer people who know about any of this, the safer. Everyone stays. Rivera nodded. Understood, Bill. Operational security. The fact that an elite sergeant was now taking orders from a former janitor didn't seem strange anymore, given everything they had learned. Chen looked back at the gymnasium where Bill had worked anonymously for 8 years. It's going to be weird seeing you in actual security gear instead of coveralls. Bill chuckled. Son, after 25 years of combat gear, trust me, coveralls are more comfortable. His humor was dry, but genuine, the mark of someone who had found peace with his choices. Rodriguez asked a question that had been bothering him. Bill, why did you really stay here for 8 years? You could have taken any security job in the country with your background. Bill's answer revealed the depth of his character. Because this is where I was needed. And because sometimes the most important work is the kind nobody notices until something goes wrong. As they walked across the base together, the dynamic had completely changed. Rivera's elite team now moved with protective awareness of security detail, while Bill scanned their surroundings with the constant vigilance of someone whose past made him a permanent target. The quiet janitor, who had been invisible for 8 years, was now the most important person on Fort Bradley. Mitchell voiced what everyone was thinking. This is going to take some getting used to. But Bill's response carried the confidence of someone who had adapted to countless changes throughout his career. Son, if there's one thing the military teaches you, it's how to adapt to new situations. He looked around at his former gymnasium. Besides, someone still has to keep this place clean. The story of William Bill Thompson revealed something profound about heroism and service. True strength often hides behind humility. Extraordinary capability frequently disguises itself as ordinary work, and the most important battles are sometimes fought by people whose greatest skill is remaining invisible until the moment they're needed most. Is 8 years as a janitor hadn't been retirement. They had been another form of service, protecting and watching over the next generation of soldiers who would face their own battles in an increasingly dangerous world. That evening, as Fort Bradley returned to normal operations with enhanced security protocols, Rivera found Bill in the gymnasium, not cleaning this time, but conducting a thorough security assessment of the facility. Tomorrow, we start training, Bill announced. Real tactical preparation, not just physical fitness, but situational awareness, threat assessment, and coordinated response protocols. His transformation from janitor to instructor was complete, but his fundamental character remained unchanged. Chin arrived early the next morning to find Bill already at work implementing new security measures throughout the gymnasium. The difference was that now he wore tactical gear instead of coveralls and carried equipment that matched his actual capabilities rather than hiding them. Ready to learn some new skills, Bill asked with the same quiet confidence he had always possessed. The young soldiers who had dismissed him as irrelevant just days earlier now hung on his every word, understanding that they were receiving training from someone whose experience encompassed situations they could barely imagine. Rodriguez took notes. As Bill explained advanced tactical concepts, Mitchell practiced new defensive positions and absorbed lessons about threat recognition that weren't taught in any standard military manual. As weeks passed, Bill's influence spread throughout Fort Bradley. His security recommendations were implemented base-wide as training methods adopted by multiple units, his quiet leadership style becoming a model for how true professionals conducted themselves. A man who had been invisible for 8 years became one of the most respected figures on the base without changing his fundamental approach to service and duty. 6 months later, a new group of young soldiers arrived for training. They heard stories about the legendary Bill Thompson, the former SEAL, who had saved Fort Bradley, but when they met him, they found a quiet man in his 60s who treated everyone with respect, focused on the work that needed doing, and never spoke about his own accomplishments unless directly asked. He remained the same person. He had always been someone who understood that true heroism doesn't require recognition, only commitment to doing what's right when it matters most. The gymnasium where Bill had once pushed a mop now serves as a training center, where his methods are taught to the next generation of soldiers. The emergency weapons cache he had accessed during the attack became the foundation for enhanced security protocols throughout the military. His story spread quietly through military circles, not as propaganda, but as an example of how real professionals conduct themselves with humility, dedication, and readiness to serve regardless of recognition or reward. Today, visitors to Fort Bradley might notice a small plaque near the gymnasium entrance. It doesn't mention heroics or dramatic rescues. It simply reads, "In recognition of faithful service, William J. Thompson, 2016 to 2024. Those who know the story understand that the greatest tribute to Bill's legacy isn't the recognition, but the fact that young soldiers continue to benefit from his example, learning that true strength comes not from what you've done, but from your willingness to do what needs doing, regardless of who's watching or whether anyone will ever know your name."